During a heartfelt segment of his show, Steve Harvey received an unexpected, emotional message from Burkina Faso's president, Ibrahim Traoré. The message, filled with deep respect, admiration, and raw emotion, caught Harvey completely off guard, bringing him to tears live on television. This rare and powerful moment touched the hearts of millions, as two influential figures shared a genuine, unscripted, emotional exchange. Steve Harvey walked onto his talk show stage wearing his usual bright smile. The audience clapped and cheered. Steve, full of his signature energy, launched into the day's topic, the power of purpose. It was supposed to be an ordinary segment. He had just finished sharing a personal story about his struggles growing up in poverty, when a production assistant briskly walked toward the stage, leaning in to whisper something in Steve's ear. Steve's expression shifted from confusion to surprise, to complete silence. He turned slowly to the camera, cleared his throat, and said, folks, I've just been told there's a very special message for me, and it's coming from somewhere I never expected. Burkina Faso. The screen behind him lit up with a golden seal and bold words. Message from President Ibrahim Traoré. The studio went completely quiet. Not a whisper, not a cough. No, Steve, now visibly shaken, looked into the camera and softly said, "Why would the president of Burkina Faso want to send me a message? I don't even know what this is about." He sat down, eyes locked on the screen, gripping the arms of his chair. The video began. The screen opened to a calm, warm setting, a simple wooden desk, a flag of Burkina Faso behind it. Then appeared a man with strong, kind eyes and a soft yet firm voice. President Ibrahim Traoré. Steve leaned forward, fingers tightening on the chair. Mr. Steve Harvey, the president began in English with a soft African accent. "I speak to you not just as a leader, but as a brother." The entire studio leaned in. "You don't know me, but we know you," Traoré continued. "In the villages of Burkina Faso, your voice reaches farther than you may think. Your words of strength, faith, and second chances have touched people you'll never meet." Steve blinked, stunned. His hands began to tremble. Traoré's voice thickened with emotion. "During our darkest nights, when war threatened our peace, your story gave me hope. You reminded me that leadership is not about titles, but about purpose and heart." The room was completely silent. You could hear hearts beating. Then Traoré looked straight into the camera. "From a soldier who rose to lead his people, to a boy who once had nothing in America, I thank you." Steve's lips parted, but no words came out. It's only the start of tears. For the first time in a long time, Steve Harvey was speechless. He reached for a tissue, wiping his face, as the message continued. "I've watched you cry for others, laugh with strangers, give to those who thought they were forgotten." Traoré's voice echoed. "In my country, we know that kind of heart. We call it a heart of the sun-warm, brave, and giving light." Steve whispered, barely audible, "Wow." The president paused, then continued. "This message is not political. It is personal. I see in you the story of a man who never gave up, and it reminds me to never give up on my people." The message ended with Traoré saying something in more, the native language of Burkina Faso. Steve, his voice cracking, turned to his team. "What did he say at the end?" Translator stood up and gently replied. He said, "Even the strongest man needs to be reminded that his voice still matters." Steve covered his face. The crowd was crying. Even the cameraman's hands were shaking. This wasn't just a TV moment. It was a meeting of souls across oceans, across struggles, across brotherhood. And it had only just begun. Steve sat quietly, his hands folded, his eyes glistening. The audience waited, but he couldn't speak. Something heavy had touched his spirit, a weight of truth, a connection, the feeling of being truly seen. After a long pause, Steve looked up and said, "You know, you never think that your words go that far. You just try to be real, try to survive, try to help." The crowd clapped gently, but Steve raised his hand to stop them. "This ain't about applause," he said. "This is about purpose." Backstage, producers debated cutting to commercial. Steve refused. "I want the world to hear every second of this. Don't stop the feed. Suddenly, the screen flickered. Second surprise appeared. It wasn't a pre-recorded video this time. It was a live connection. President Ibrahim Traoré appeared again live on video. Steve gasped. Mr. Harvey, Traoré said, smiling gently. For once, let me speak to you man to man, not from one country to another, from one dreamer to another. The studio fell into absolute silence again. A storm of emotion was rising. No one was ready for what the president would say next. Traoré leaned toward the camera, his tone soft and sincere. You see me now as a president, he said. But I was once a boy with no shoes. I walked barefoot to school. I carried books tied with string. And many nights I went to sleep hungry. Steve lowered his head, his shoulders trembling as he fought back tears. The president continued, When I was a teenager, I saw war. With my own eyes, I saw people give up. But I also saw people rise. He paused, then said something unexpected. One day in a crowded internet cafe, I saw your video. Don't give up. I didn't even understand all your words. But I understood your tears, your passion, your pain, and your hope. Steve looked up, stunned. You helped a young boy in Burkina Faso believe he could be more than his pain. And that boy became me. The crowd gasped. Some wiped tears freely. Traoré smiled gently, said when I heard your voice again. Last week, speaking about purpose, I knew it was time. I said something back. Steve covered his face with his hands. But then came the words that broke him. President Traoré took a deep breath and looked directly into the camera. Mr. Harvey, he said, you once said you wanted to visit Africa. Not as a celebrity, but as a brother, as someone who wants to give back. Steve nodded, whispering, Yes, I did. While Traoré smiled, I want to invite you personally to Burkina Faso, not for cameras, not for attention, but to see what your voice has built. In silence, the studio audience gasped. You've helped lift spirits across oceans. Now let me show you the seeds you've planted in our soil. Steve's hands trembled. Wasn't sure whether to speak or cry, but Traoré wasn't finished. There's a young orphanage in Ouagadougou. The children there know your name. They pray with your words. They laugh with your jokes. They believe they matter because you mattered. Steve stood up, his eyes full of tears. The audience rose with him, clapping softly, many wiping their own eyes. But Traoré had one last surprise. He looked into the lens and said, In 7 days they will gather in the village square, waiting to meet the man whose words crossed oceans and healed hearts. The countdown had begun. The very next morning, Steve was already packing. No cameras, no media alert, just him, a carry-on suitcase, and a heart full of questions. The world was buzzing. Every major news outlet ran headlines. President of Burkina Faso moved Steve Harvey to tears, a message that crossed oceans. But Steve wasn't going for the world. He was going for the kids. For that voice that had spoken to his soul. As his plane flew across the Atlantic, Steve stared out the window. His mind drifted back to his childhood, growing up poor in Cleveland. The nights they went hungry, the times his dreams seemed too big to hold. Now he was flying to Africa. It's called by a president who had once felt the same pain. He whispered to himself, God, why me? He didn't know what to expect. Would the kids even recognize him? Would he be strong enough to face them? Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, President Traoré stood before a crowd of children in a sunlit courtyard. He smiled and said, He's coming. The kids screamed in joy. But in the back, a little girl had tears in her eyes. She clutched a small notebook. Her name was Acha. She was only 10 small, soft-spoken, and wise beyond her years. But in her hand, the notebook shook slightly as she whispered to her caretaker, Will he read it? Will he care? The caretaker smiled, kneeling beside her. He's already cared more than most. H's letter wasn't long, but it carried a world of pain. Dear Mr. Steve, my name is Acha. My papa died 2 years ago. My mama is sick. Sometimes I cry at night. But one day someone played your video. You said you were born to do something great. I believed you. Thank you for speaking to us, even if you didn't know we were listening. I hope you smile when you see us. Picture. Little sister Acha, as the sun set over Ouagadougou. Children practiced songs. Others made drawings with his name. Hope filled the air. But Aisha stayed quiet, sitting beneath a mango tree, notebook clutched to her chest. In that moment, it wasn't about fame. It wasn't about politics. It was about a man who once slept in a car, meeting a child who sometimes slept without. Dinner, and the sky seemed to whisper. They were meant to find each other. The plane touched down on a dusty runway just after noon. Steve Harvey stepped out, shielding his eyes from the bright sun. No paparazzi. No grand parade. Just a few guards. 2 translators, and a young aide holding a simple sign. Welcome, Brother Steve. His heartbeat quickened inside a nearby van. He was driven through the streets, simple homes, small markets, children waving as he passed. When they reached the orphanage gates, he wasn't ready for what he saw. Over 100 children had gathered, holding handmade signs that read, "You matter. Thank you, Mr. Steve. We love you." Tears filled his eyes. President Traoré stepped forward.